and I became very active in Arcadia. I really started with uh, Girl Scouts in Arcadia, and first had one troop, and then had two troops, and then I had then when we moved down here, I was responsible for 500 Girl Scouts, and I had to get leaders for all these troops every year. And I would walk into a room, and ladies would literally leave because they knew I was going to try to talk them in to be a leader.
How did you get involved with the Girl Scouts?
um, I started with brownies in Arcadia, and then it was a means that I wanted. Their Corona Del Mar Elementary School was still in existence at that time, and I wanted my oldest daughter to be in a troop right away so she could meet people and I could meet people. So she joined the troop, and Barbara Woods and I were, her daughter was in the troop too, and so we were the leaders and to do it. And
What was the name of the troop here in Newport?
the troop, it was the troops have numbers, so they don't have names, kind of business. So I don't remember what the number was, but and then after the girls went to to Corona Del Mar Elementary School, Gretchen was to go up to Lincoln, which was a middle school at that time. And it was a wild school. They had a bad principal, and there was just no discipline, and it was chaotic. So I tried to get her into Harbor Day School, and I could not get her in unless I put my younger one in. So both girls started at Harbor Day School, and so I immediately was a Girl Scout leader at Harbor Day School.
What years were that?
Oh, I knew you would ask me this.
Because my dad went to Harbor Day too.
Did he?
As a child.
What was his name?
Brent Ogden. Brent Ogden Jr. And my grandparents were Peggy and Brent Ogden.
I know that name. Yeah, I know that. Yeah, so they were there at the same time.
But a small world.
Yeah, small world. Yeah. So so I started Girl Scouts there, and then when Gretchen was in junior high level there, the Girl Scouts were kind of dropping out because the meeting date didn't work with whether they were playing soccer or they were taking piano or they were doing dancing or they were doing something else. So some other ladies and I created a troop where we had 120 girls in one troop. And
was that usual?
No, it was most unusual. And I had the girls from all the public schools of junior high level, from the Catholic school, from Harbor Day School, and from the other private schools that were in this area. I had them all into one troop, which was to their advantage because when they went to high school, they always knew some people. And the way I programmed it, we met up at the church we were going to at St. Michael's Church once a month. And I divided the girls into red, yellow, and blue troops. And there were some mothers who dealt with red, yellow, and blue of taking those girls camping. And then the other mothers, I were asked to please do a badge in your house on the day you want to do it. So one mother would do cooking on Tuesday, another mother would do art on Wednesday, someone else would do first aid on Thursday. And the girls could sign up and go to an individual house and where there were, say, 8 to 10 girls doing that one badge. So they met the girls in that situation from the different schools doing the different badge. And we did great Girl Scouting. They had, we not only took them camping, we took them, we had boating expeditions for them. We had trips for them. I sent a group of girls to the chalet in Switzerland through this program. I sent the group to Washington, D.C. through this program. And, we did fantastic Girl Scouting with them. And to this day, some of the girls still see me and thank me for that program. I took them camping down at the dunes, and we had a camp down there. What I didn't know was some of them escaped at night and went swimming in the swimming pool at the hotel. They told me about it later. I didn't know it at the time. Well, if you have 120 girls camping at one kind of sitting, it's a lot of tents. And I still had Fritz at home, and once I had them all out camping and all the tents got wet. So Fritz and I had to put all the tents up in my front yard to dry them before we could store them.
Who's Fritz?
Fritz is my second son. God bless him, because he was a wonderful helper. This thing, and we rented a storage place to store all this camping equipment, because it was a lot of stuff.
How barren was the area at that time, or how developed was when you were camping down there?
It was, some of them were pretty barren.
Just was it Fashion Island that existed and none of the homes yet?
There was Fashion Island. There was Fashion Island, but it was, it was adventuresome when you take out 120 girls. Believe me.
So it was kind of reminiscent of the Boy Scout Jamboree that they had there.
Yes.
So you had the Girl Scout Jamboree there.
I had the Girl Scout Jamboree. Yeah.
And what year was that, if you don't mind asking, if you can recall?
When we moved here, we've been here now 45 years. So it was kind of it was at least 5 or 6 years after we were here that I was doing Girl Scouts. And then I started doing AFS, which is the American Field Service Program, where you host kids through the high school, or you send kids overseas. And it was at Corona Del Mar High School, and we sent 4 kids overseas every year from our high school. I mean, we hosted 4 kids rather, and one year we sent 12 kids overseas, and that was a big undertaking, because you have to go through the selection process of the kids. They have to have certain grades, and they have to have the ability to go and live in a foreign language. But those kids will never forget the experience either. I was just kind of rereading some letters that we sent one, Sherry Loofborough's son, down to Ecuador or someplace, and he was a wonderful swimmer, and he was immediately on the team in this country going to the Olympics from that country as a swimmer. I mean, it was an amazing experience. And one young person went to Iceland, and the language in Iceland is very difficult. It's a very difficult kind of experience. We had one young guy down in South America, country that had when the British came and was going to have the revolution, down in
Argentina.
And AFS called me and said, "You've got to get hold of him, and you can give him choices. He can come home, or he can go to a different country in South America, or he can stay." And when I got hold of him, he said, "Come home." He said, "This is my only chance to be in a revolution. I'm staying." So he stayed.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So, it was a fascinating kind of number of years that I had because of these kids and where they were and what they went through, and kind of business. But I was still doing that program when we had to start with a library. And
which library? This one? Newport Public Library.
This library. The chairman of the library trustees was a friend of ours from Stanford, and he
What was his
came
name?
to us. His name was Sword. Charles Sword. His name is on the reading room up at the top here. And he said, would you be willing, the city is willing to help do the library if they have a demonstration of private money for public building. So it was our job to raise $1 million to show private support. And at first I thought, oh, this won't be hard. We'll get a few wealthy people in Newport Beach to give us some big sums, and we will be able to do it. But it was a recession, and people didn't have big money. And so I kind of broke into a sweat when I realized that it was going to be a very hard job. It took us 5 years to do it, and we had 3,000 donations, and I wrote every thank you letter for every donation. We ran readathons for little children. We had a doctor's party. Doctors don't give money, I discovered afterward, but I had some author come speak to doctors. But what doctors did do is when their clients came in, when their patients came in, they said to them, you know, they're building a new library, why don't you help? So we got some of the patients. The city helped us. We got to do a mailer and a water bill, and we got back money from people none of us knew, and because they lived on the East Coast, but they had a summer place in Newport Beach, and they had to pay the water bill in Newport Beach, but they lived in New York, Boston, Florida, someplace else, and so we got donations from across the country from people who also owned a place here in Newport Beach. And that made the library really go in to look to see where, it was the first time the library really studied about where their patrons came from. And they discovered how many people outside of Newport Beach use this library. And because we are surrounded by county libraries, Irvine, Laguna Beach, and Costa Mesa all have county libraries. And the county libraries, at that time, the county was broke, and so they were closing their libraries. So people would get in their car and say, I'm not sure the library's open. So they came here because they knew it was open. So they knew it was open and that was how we got so many more people that are coming. But we're also the hub for all of the colleges in Orange County. This is where the kids study from all the colleges in Orange County. We have these wonderful carols that look out at the ocean and that are quiet, and we have a staff that is dedicated to helping anyone who comes in the door here. And that's their motto, is that we help anybody that comes. We also have a teenage section up there because our public schools do not buy enough books for, if they say read Tom Sawyer, we buy a lot of books on Tom Sawyer so that the kids have access to the books to read. So we work with the high schools about what they're going to read. And then our children's section, which is where John and I have our name on it, that place is packed all the time because they have the computers and they have story time. And now that when they built the new addition to the place, they have all these games, they have puzzles and trains and blocks and things for little kids. Sometimes you come in here on a Sunday and that whole section in the children's area is filled. A lot of Asians are here now. They bring their kids for entertainment on Sundays. That's their outlet on Sundays, is how they have their kids. And of course they're getting educated at the same time. So
I was one of those kids as a byproduct. I remember when this opened, and I used to play where in the world is Carmen Sandiego on those computers all the time.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So, well, of course, it's the kids that I'm really interested, that they read and that they do it. Because when we moved here, then my youngest, read 25 books a week. And the first place I found was not the grocery store or not the gas station, but the library. The library, because she had to have books to read. The day we moved into the house, it was raining, and I had plumbers and carpenters and painters and everybody there, and she said, I have to go to the library, and I said, I'm not going to make it today, dear. Here's the encyclopedia, read that. And she did. And she has been the most conscientious person with this little child she has about reading to him. And he talks like he's 25, and he's now just about to be 10 tomorrow.
Wow.
And he's got this huge vocabulary and this huge comprehension about things, and just because she's read to him so much.
It's rare to find a very articulate lexicon within someone that young.
Yeah, well, but he's picked it up through the reading that she's done, and he's now able to read himself. So she tells me what she's buying for him for.
Now, you mentioned in high school, that's when you really started getting into libraries. Would you care to elaborate on that?
Did I what?
You mentioned that when you went to high school up in Brentwood,
yeah,
that's when you really started getting into libraries,
right?
Or books per se.
Right.
Could you elaborate on that a little?
Well, it was because the social scene was just not something I was going to fit into, and I could read, and so the libraries, I read a tremendous number of books about horses. I was very into horses and dogs, and that was my out of what to read. And at nighttime, when I was growing up, there was no television, and after we had dinner together, my whole family sat and read. I mean, that was our nighttime activity, was reading. My parents were both avid readers and read magazines and books and knew everything, in print. So I was accustomed to this pattern of reading. And dinner table conversation when I was growing up, there was always intelligent conversation. You know, my father always had something to say about something that happened in the news or some historical fact or something. And both my parents were very intelligent and had a lot to talk about. And my mother fixed breakfast, lunch, and dinner. We never ate any meal out. And that was, you had to have conversation at breakfast, lunch, and dinner. You couldn't just sit and read the newspaper or not converse with my parents. And in order to be able to do that, you had to be able to say, I read. Mm-hmm. And even when my mother was rather housebound, but not really completely housebound, she lived on this avocado ranch in Santa Ana area. She had a friend that worked at the Santa Ana Library. And this friend brought my mother a box of books every month of 25 or 30 books. And my mother read those 25 or 30 books. And at her funeral, this librarian stood up and said, in this period of time, she read 5,000 books.
Wow. Wow.
And so my mother always had, did you know that Lincoln said this? Or did you know that Roosevelt said this? Or did you know that, something else that, that she always had something to talk about from what she was reading. And that's a real skill that, is kind of lost today because people are watching television and, there's not much to say about that.
Well, there's actually a question I have in regards to that is, I know that you mentioned that your family were avid readers. Did you guys have a family radio at all that you used to listen together with or anything to that degree?
Well, as a child, I can remember in Dallas when we would be there with my grandparents that we would listen to the news every night after dinner.
Was this during the 30s?
Yeah.
Did you ever listen to a fireside chat by chance?
It could be that we would sit around the radio. I mean, you didn't see anything, but you sat around the radio to listen. That was what we did. But I don't really remember my family particularly listening to the radio. One of the things that my father did do was the first time you could be on an airplane and listen, my father's company made the devices that you could listen, the first time. And when it came out that, some of these things, my father would buy a bunch of these and send them to his friends and say, listen to this, because it was so exciting to him that you could do these things that after the war, he tried not to do military things any longer. He tried to invent things that were going to be useful for people. And so his company was called Electronic Engineering Company of California. And it was the first electronic plant in Orange County. And they had their building was in the middle of an orange grove in the Santa Ana area. It's now a school, I understand, that they took it over and they have it as a school. But it was an exciting time. And my father was a wonderful boss, and they cooked Thanksgiving dinner for him, and my father carved to serve everybody. There were people who worked for my father still say, oh, he was the most wonderful person to work for, that he was just such a caring individual and so careful to know what families were doing and what was going on in everybody's life. That was a unique quality that he had that was
very rare.
Very good,
Now, with that being said, since your father was into electronics, but it sounds like primarily that radios weren't a form of entertainment in your family, would you say that your experience with reading that, with your mom reading those books, that you translated that to your children?
Oh, definitely. Definitely. So my oldest son, we lived in Arcadia, and the racetrack had built the library in Arcadia. So we had a wonderful library in Arcadia. And when I moved down here and I looked at the Corona Del Mar Library, I went like this, thinking, oh dear, this is never going to do us. But, it did. And then when we got this library, it helped. But my oldest son would get he would get an author and he would read everything that author wrote, and then he'd get another one and read everything. So, and he went through at one stage, he went through all British authors, all German authors, all Italian authors, all, so that he read everything. And he has the memory of like my husband. He can still tell you what he read and what facts are. This is the one that's an author now. So
I'd love to meet him because that's exactly what we're like.
yeah. Well, he's Walter did Stanford in 3 years, and then he went to Harvard Law School and to the Kennedy School. So he was there 4 years, and then he worked for a law firm in Washington D.C. For some years, and then they sent him to Hong Kong, and he lived in Hong Kong for 3 years working for the law firm.
Was that when it was still British?
Yes. And then he went back to Washington, D.C., and he was a speechwriter for the chair of the SEC for 5 years and wrote all of his speeches. And that was a very interesting job. So he enjoyed that very much, and he did a good job of that. Then he went back to Hong Kong and worked for Fidelity Investments in Hong Kong, and had to go to a lot of the Asian countries at that period of time. And then by that time, they had 2 children. Their second child was born in Hong Kong. Their first one was born in Washington. And they lived on the 15th floor or 20th floor or something of this high-rise building. And when my oldest grandson was little, he could get down to the playground, but he wasn't tall enough to press the number to get back up. So they had a full-time ama that lived, with them, a Filipino. They're all Filipinos, and she worked, every day but one, and cleaned the bathroom every day and did all the dishes, and it was an interesting life.
It's an interesting family pattern too, because you were born in London in a British Isle, and then your son had your grandson on another British territory, and they still had help at a house. Mr. Cutter repeats itself.
So they came back to Washington D.C. and he worked for another kind of a firm that dealt with railroads and airplanes and things on that order. I really don't know exactly what he did, but he was considered very valuable because he said, I'm either going to leave the job altogether, or I'll work 1 week and then not work 1 week because I'm going to write a book. And they said, oh no, you have to work. So even after they moved up to Phillips Exeter Academy, where my daughter-in-law taught math they were there for 6 years, she teaching math, and he was still getting paid from this other job, something like $500 an hour, something ridiculous, because they were so eager for him to do the work. But he wrote the first book, and then started on the second one, and that one he had the publisher, so that I told you, so that was
Simon & Schuster.
It was good, yeah. So
now, with that being said, with helping with the library here, you said in the 60s, I believe. What transpired from your involvement here in the library? You mentioned that the children's section being named after you and your husband.
Well, I went on to other jobs. I went on to working with Pacific Symphony, and that's what I'm doing now. My husband was on the board, and then he started having all these health problems, and so I kind of took over the adolescent program of running the youth orchestra program, and that's. But I still go to city council on library issues. If there's something, we had somebody on the city council who said they wanted to make it a pay library, and I was right there at city council saying no, because we have the Costa Mesa school district, and we have kids that come from Costa Mesa in our school district. We cannot charge the kids for that situation. And anyway, we have people, and during the summertime, Newport Beach gets lots and lots of people from back east or the Midwest or something here. We can't charge them to come use the library, and they love the library, that they come to do it. And we have the retired men's club here, and because the housewife says, dear, why don't you go to the library? And this is where they are, reading the morning paper. And so that's important too, that we have that here. And for many people, this library is their place where they come. if they do nothing else all week long, they'll come to this library. And to me, that's very important.